right,
Good
well,
morning, everyone. While folks are still logging on, if you could make sure that you enter your name and affiliation in the chat. That way we don't have to sort of spend the time to run through everyone on the list.
it's 10:01 and we're at about 46 participants so far. As Maya suggested, please put your name and affiliation in the chat so we don't have to run through and do full intros, but I will turn it over to Michelle if you're online, if you want to unmute and we could get the meeting started, Michelle.
Yep. Thank you very much. My name is Michelle Duggett. I'm the co-chair, the government co-chair of this consortium. And we do have a special guest from DEP to talk about the Alafaya, Manatee, and Hillsborough BMAP. So I'd like to turn it over to you.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me one moment and we will jump in. All right, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, and I cannot see you guys anymore, so you'll have to let me know if I need to pause for something. And I'm going to ask Maya or someone there to take a look at the chat so that if any questions come up, you guys can let me know. All right, good morning.
Confirm that they can see Anita's screen because I'm not seeing it.
I can't see it either.
Okay.
This is Moira. I cannot see it either. And good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Moira. All right, we're gonna try again. Share. So far, I have the green outline around my screen.
That's good now for me.
Yes, I see it.
Perfect. We can see it now, Anita.
All right, thank you for letting me know. Okay, good. All right, let's jump in. All right, my name is Anita Stein. I am the basin coordinator for 3 BMAPs in the Tampa Bay tributaries. Today, we're going to go over the status of the Alafaya, Hillsborough, and Manatee River BMAPs. I encourage you all to ask questions as we go, and there will be some time at the end for additional discussion. I heard somebody talk. Do I need to pause? Okay, moving on. We will start with an overview of the BMAPs in general, and then some policy and reporting reminders. The statewide annual report, otherwise known as STAR, and we'll finish by discussing progress. Let's jump in. DEER is charged with monitoring and assessing Florida's surface water and groundwater quality, identifying, verifying, prioritizing pollution problems, developing strategies to resolve the problems, and implementing those strategies through comprehensive restoration actions in partnership with local stakeholders. BMAP and restoration are steps within the larger cycle of evaluation and assessment of water quality standards, where the ultimate goal is to attain water quality standards. DEP may develop a basin management action plan for water bodies that have TMDLs. A TMDL, a total maximum daily load, is a restoration target. It represents how much of a pollutant can be introduced into a water body without causing exceedances of the water quality standards, aka assimilative capacity. When developing a BMAP, consensus building meetings are held with the public and local stakeholders, which allow for better success during implementation. The final BMAP is presented to the DEP secretary to be signed and adopted, which makes the BMAP legally enforceable. Legal requirements can be enforced through wastewater treatment facility permits, stormwater permits, or through the authority of the adopted BMAP itself. The Florida Watershed Restoration Act directs us to integrate appropriate management strategies, aka projects, and establish a schedule to implement the strategies. BMAPs are implemented with a phased approach and using adaptive management so that new information can be incorporated as needed. They are reviewed annually. In short, work with community leaders, develop and implement restoration plans, measure success, and adapt to attain water quality standards, aka restoration. Key components of BMAPs. BMAPs outline the TMDLs that are being addressed, along with the specific areas and pollution sources targeted for restoration. They follow a phased implementation approach with defined milestones to ensure progress over time. Each BMAP identifies the projects and management strategies to achieve water quality targets, while also considering the potential impacts of future growth. It includes an implementation timeline and commitments to specific actions and the expected improvements in water quality resulting from those efforts. To ensure progress toward meeting the TMDL, BMAPs also establish a process for evaluation. This includes monitoring plans, project reporting, periodic follow-up meetings, and ongoing water quality analyses, all of which help assess how the water body is responding to restoration activities. The map on the left shows areas covered by each BMAP. The northernmost Tampa Bay tributary BMAP is the Hillsborough River BMAP, adopted in 2014, and addresses fecal indicator bacteria, FIB, impairments in water bodies or water body segments. We refer to those as WIBIDs. Next is the Alafaya BMAP to the south, and to the south of it is the Manatee River BMAP. Both were initially adopted in 2014 and then updated in 2025. Both of these include TMDLs for fecal indicator bacteria and nutrients. The nutrient TMDLs included in the Alafaya River BMAP are the Alafaya River tidal segment, adopted in 2011, Mustang Ranch Creek, adopted in 2009, and 30 Mile Creek, adopted in 2004. The QR code on the right takes you to the BMAP page where you can learn more. The fecal indicator bacteria TMDLs included in the Alafaya River BMAP were adopted in 2009 and are for Turkey Creek, Mustang Ranch Creek, English Creek, and Poley Creeks. You may notice the parameter at the time the TMDL was written was for fecal coliform, but now it is E. coli for freshwaters and enterococci for marine waters. That's because in 2016, DEP updated the fecal indicator bacteria standard to match EPA's recommendations. So our goal in the BMAP is to simply meet the current FIB water quality standards. The fecal indicator bacteria TMDLs adopted in 2004 and included in the Hillsborough River BMAP are for Blackwater Creek, New River, Sparkman Branch, Baker Creek, Flint Creek, and Lower Hillsborough River. The nutrient TMDLs in the Manatee River BMAP were adopted in 2009 and are for Rattlesnake Slough and Nonsense Creek. The fecal indicator bacteria TMDLs in the Manatee River BMAP, adopted in 2009, are for Rattlesnake Slough, Cedar Creek, Nonsense Creek, Braden River above Evers Reservoir, and Gilly Creek, which was added to the BMAP during the 2025 BMAP update. On the next 3 slides, we'll list each of the BMAP's stakeholders, organized into 3 main groups, with the main differences appearing among the responsible entities category, which is comprised mostly of local governments and agriculture. Responsible agencies and other interested stakeholders are similar across the 3 BMAPs. These are the stakeholders for the Alafaya River BMAP. Some stakeholders are in both Alafaya and Hillsborough River BMAP. And further south, here are the Manatee River BMAP stakeholders. That finishes our background slides. Does anyone have any questions?
There are currently no questions in the chat, Anita.
Thank you, Maya. Each year, we take a look at water quality results of fecal indicator bacteria sampling over a rolling 7.5-year period, similar to the 7.5-year verified period used in assessments. Here we show the FIB TMDL waters for both the Hillsborough River and Alafaya BMAPs. In the table on the right, we show the percent of data points that exceed the 10% threshold value for each water body. The goal is for that number to be below 10%. A new evaluation we are performing is to look for statistical change in the frequency of exceedance when comparing 2 data periods for FIB. The old period is January 2007 through June 30th of 2014. And the new period is January 2018 through June 30th of 2025. In the map, you'll notice WIBIDs are filled green, where the data shows a statistical improvement, but where no statistical change has occurred. In gray, sorry, let me try that again. I think I messed up. Let's see here. The map shows blue where no statistical change has occurred, gray where statistical decline has been documented, and green where statistical improvement has been noted. And here we show the results of the same evaluations for the manatee B maps fecal indicator bacteria TMDLs. Of special note, according to our most recent assessments, the WIBID Braden River above Ward Lake attains the bacteria standard. And this is great news. It's been placed in category 2T. That's because when evaluated using the required binomial hypothesis test, which ensures statistical confidence, the exceedance frequency does not exceed the 10% listing threshold. The simple percentages shown in the table on the top right are raw calculations for illustration or estimation only. And the official assessment relies on the binomial test, which determines whether the number of exceedances are high enough to indicate a true water quality problem rather than normal variability. So there are 3 different tests that we're talking about in this. Are there any questions on the bacteria evaluations?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay. Moving on to policy and reporting reminders for the Alafaya and Manatee B maps. Let's start with wastewater limits. Where the law does not provide effluent limits or a compliance timeframe, new effluent standards will take effect at the time of permit renewal or no later than 5 years after BMAP adoption, whichever is sooner. Refer to tables 5 and 6 in the BMAP documents. And please reach out to the permitters to answer specific questions about future changes to permits. Next, February 2026 began a requirement on utilities with sewer lines and BMAPs. Every 2 years, they must provide DEP a list of properties with existing OSTDS where sewer is available but have not connected. And next is a requirement to minimize infiltration of liquid manure, specifically on confined animal feeding operations, which meet certain criteria. Within 2 years of a BMAP adoption, dairies need to provide a feasibility study for upgrading pond liners to concrete or geosynthetic liners. More wastewater requirements, OSTDS remediation plans and wastewater remediation plans. The 2025 BMAPs include boundary expansions that extend remediation plan requirements to additional local governments. Responsible entities who are newly subject to 403.067 subsection 7, paragraph A, subparagraph 9 Florida statutes have 1 year from BMAP adoption, which means they are due June 27th of this year, to submit their applicable remediation plans. In the BMAPs, the OSTDS remediation plan requirement is in section 4.1.1.1, and the wastewater plan requirement is in section 4.1.2.3. And now on to golf courses. The draft nutrient.
We do have a question in the chat about how many CAFOs are in the subject area.
I do not have that number, but I can get back to somebody with the right person to contact.
Yep, it's Simon Bolin, and I can give you his contact information in a follow-up email.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question if we have time.
Sure, go ahead.
Has you talk about the difference in liners from packed clay to geosynthetic or concrete? Has there been any studies done on the efficiency of clay versus the other two? Because there's a large expense difference between those different products.
Yeah, I understand the expense concern. Moira, do you know the best way to get this information to Mr. Simon?
Yeah, we can try to find some information for you, and I think that's the purpose of having the CAFOs provide us with that evaluation in identifying the environmental, technical, and economic feasibility of upgrading to a concrete or geosynthetic liner because of those resource constraints. But we can try to see if there are any studies that could maybe help answer some of those questions. I don't necessarily know of those off the top of our heads, but we can see if there's anything that we could provide you with.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. More questions?
Not seeing any additional questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to golf courses. So due June 27th of 2026 is the draft nutrient management plan, NMP. We're gonna count those as the first report from the golf courses. The final NMP will be due June 27th of 2027. That'll be the final version of the plan, and it's going to be counted as the second report. And then after that, each year, annual reporting will begin, and the reports will begin being due. Sorry, it's a lot of beings. November of 2028 through January of 2029, and each year after that. Additionally, golf course superintendents for publicly owned golf courses, those that are owned or operated by local governments, such as counties, municipalities, CDDs, must have obtained the UF IFAS Golf Course Best Management Practices Program certification by December 31st of this year. Golf course requirements and resources can be found by following the QR code. We will have another webinar in May to go over these requirements with superintendents. Please contact me if you haven't received an invite but need to attend. And then I had a note to pause here and see if there are any more questions.
None in the chat.
Okie doke. Let's move on to the statewide annual report, STAR. Under Section 403.0675 Florida statutes, we're required to provide an annual update to the governor and legislature. Therefore, the STAR 2025 will be published soon around July 1st. It reports on TMDLs, BMAPs, minimum flows or minimum water levels, and recovery or prevention strategies. STAR 2025 presents updates through December 31st of 2025 on the BMAP restoration projects and management strategies. Each responsible entity must update and add new projects to demonstrate how they're going to meet their allocations and maintain them despite changing landscapes. This is especially important for anyone applying to and receiving DEP grant funding. Projects gotta be in there. This is a reminder to all responsible entities to please check and make sure that the appropriate people in your organization have access to the DEP BMAP portal. Let me know if you need us to add or remove someone. This is a reminder to also keep your NMC project list up to date, as the loading calculations are important to both programs. Speaking of draft STAR, here we show each entity who has provided projects over the course of the Alafaya and Manatee BMAPs and the draft STAR 2025 tallies for completed, ongoing, underway, and planned activities and projects. Here we show who has provided projects over the course of the Hillsborough BMAP and the draft 2025 tallies. Aliphaia next steps. In other words, what's happening? Previously, the chlorophyll A criterion of 15 micrograms per liter was established for the tidal river segment, and that was to protect the adjacent downstream waters of Hillsborough Bay. And Hillsborough Bay consistently attains its chlorophyll A and seagrass targets, while the Aliphaia River tidal segment has not attained the 15 micrograms per liter restoration target. In response, DEP executed a task assignment for environmental science associates to determine if available data and information are sufficient to develop revised nutrient and response variable targets for the Aliphaia River tidal segment, and if feasible, derive site-specific numeric interpretations of Florida's narrative nutrient criterion. This work is to be completed by October 31st of this year. In Manatee BMAP, the biological data is limited for Rattlesnake Slough and Nonsense Creek, so DEP is attempting to gather biological data, specifically the Stream Condition Index, SCI, but dry conditions have been making this a challenge as recolonization requires months after flows return. And as noted earlier, Gilly Creek FIB TMDL is newly added to the BMAP. So DEP will initiate a field visit with park staff and other relevant agencies to determine available next steps in identifying sources and potential management strategies for Gilly Creek. Shifting focus to bacteria restoration, it is important to keep in mind that technologies for bacteria source identification are still extremely resource intensive. And so entities in the Hillsborough BMAP collaborate and dedicate available but limited resources to use source-specific indicators and investigate strategies for locating causes of bacteria impairments. And to assist, DEP provides entities with technical support and coordination for collaborative source identification and investigations through the open lines of communication, including quarterly tributaries assessment team calls. And DEP's laboratory provides technical review of lab resources, field tools, data interpretation, and monitoring strategies as requested. Are there any questions on the updates?
There are no questions in the chat.
All right, thank you. As a reminder, the BMAP webpage is a directory to many great resources, such as BMP efficiencies tools, a calendar of public meetings, a link to water quality grant opportunities, the STAR, and of course, the BMAPs and their story maps. Speaking of funding opportunities, DEP provides opportunities for local governments and eligible entities to submit proposals for funding to protect and restore Florida's natural resources. You can use the QR code to learn more. And you can follow this QR code to our subscriber page and elect which BMAP, TMDL, and assessment notification lists you'd like to be added to. And you can use our program's email address at the bottom here to reach out to us. Or as always, you can reach out to me directly. Thank you, and this concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Anita? I'm not seeing any so far, Anita.
Okay. Let's see where I go to stop sharing my screen. There it is. Ah, you did it.
I guess I have a question for the group. Just wondering how useful you think it is for the department and the consortium to continue to sort of partner and co-host these meetings, which we think maybe have a shared audience. Does this work well for you, or do you prefer to have them separately?
Well, what do you mean by separately, Maya?
Historically, DEP has sort of coordinated their own like distinct meeting just to focus on the BMAPs alone. We haven't necessarily, had them as a guest for a shared at a shared consortium meeting.
Well, actually, I think it does make a lot of sense, though, to blend the two together so that, that something's not lost in there because someone probably doesn't always attend both, say, like myself. So I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Hey, Maya, Julie Vogel here. I hope you can hear me. Even though City of St. Pete is not included in these BMAPs, I still think it's helpful if DEP would, continue to occasionally join us for the consortium meetings, even just hearing about, other work that is happening in the Bay, and it kind of informs the city if there are, BMAPs in the future for our area too. So I think it's helpful. Thanks, Anita.
Great.
Anita, I do see in the chat that City of Tampa prefers some of this information separately because of some of the detail needed to discuss sampling.
Yeah, Heather, we're not proposing to change the quarterly TAC calls. This is just for annual meeting setting and maybe other updates that are broader. But yeah, I agree that the quarterly meetings where we review individual data points and their results wouldn't really be appropriate for the NMC meetings.
I see Marcus and Ed have their hands raised.
Who said it first?
Marcus,
Go ahead, Marcus.
can you go off of mute, please?
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to put in a plug. I think this was presented to one of the separate BMAP meetings for the Hillsborough Alafaya BMAPs, but the SRA program does have a FIB dashboard that is out there. There's no regulatory implications behind it. It's just a source of information to help look at status and trends of FIBs in the various watersheds. So if you're not familiar with that, definitely have a look at that. It was sort of developed to help understand what's going on in these watersheds as well as just the bay as a whole. So I just want to put it out there that it is available and it's a resource that if you haven't seen, definitely take a look at it, and I'll drop the link in the chat.
Marcus.
Yeah, my question, Anita, is kind of similar to the conversations we've had in the past in terms of reconciling between the reasonable assurance plan allocations and the BMAPs. I know there's some discussion that you'll have some updates to the lower Alafaya chlorophyll A target that's being worked on, but I'm curious if there's going to be any sort of discussion of how to reconcile the load reduction targets developed for the bay versus the load reduction targets developed for the smaller tributaries in each of the BMAP areas, and how we come to some agreement on how to you know, decide what the percent reductions ought to be for either nitrogen or the bacterial load TMDLs that have been established.
Sure. So for the Alafaya, that's why we're having ESA take a look at the available data to see if we have the means to evaluate the current target and just see what makes the most sense for that area. And once we get that understanding, that'll inform us better for how to move forward. If we need allocations to address that specific area, then we hope to utilize the existing process that the stakeholders have agreed makes sense for this area and try to build from that. So I can't promise or guarantee that's how it'll end up, but that's our current thoughts on what we probably would do if we need to. First question is does it need that? And we're not really certain on that yet. Same with manatee. That's why we're trying to gather additional bacteria or biological data for the nutrients in manatee. Right now, we don't have a good sense of how those waters compare to the current standards. We have some idea, and they're looking pretty good. So we just have to gather additional info.
Appreciate that. I think you mentioned October 2026 is when the title Alafia information might be available. So I would continue to encourage to use the consortium if you thought it was practical from the DEP to kind of share that information, and we could have a
Appreciate
common
the invite.
conversation about it then.
Yeah, we appreciate your invite, and I know, for today especially, we saw value in being able to share info here together and try to bring both sets of stakeholders together a little bit more, because I feel like sometimes there was a slight divide just by the outreach mechanisms.
Sounds like the consortium agrees. So thank you for doing that.
Great. Okay. Anything else?
Is there any other
Anita.
questions for Anita?
I heard somebody.
Okay. Thank you, Anita. Much obliged. Okay, moving on. We have the industry co-chair election. And we'd like to make a recommendation that Ilya Balcom from Duke Energy will serve a 2-year term. Can we get a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. I don't know if I need to repeat it or not, Maya, for posterity.
I think we're good. I have
Okay.
a poll ready to go. I can launch.
Let's go. And I just want to express my appreciation to Tino, who's served as the industry co-chair for quite some time now, and he's done a great job at it, and recognize that he might be moving away from his current position from Mosaic. So we've have valued his experience and his thoughtful comments along all the consortium process to develop these reasonable assurance updates. And it's a new changing of the guard, so we appreciate Ilya's willingness to step up as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. This is, and I'm not just saying this, like, this is one of the fun parts of my job. And I really enjoy working with all of you at the estuary program. And it's been great to be able to work collaboratively with some regulators from time to time instead of across, the table from each other, maybe sitting next to each other at the table from time to time, which is always great. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Maya, has everybody voted?
We have about half of the participants voting, and there hasn't been much motion here since then. So if this is everybody that's going to vote, I can end the poll. Or are people still thinking, or do folks have questions?
Looks like she's got the majority now of 35.
Yes,
Yes.
very, very clear majority in support. All right, I'll close the poll.
Thank you for that, Maya. And congratulations, Ilya.
Thank you so much. And I know I have some big shoes to fill following Tino, but looking forward to working with everybody.
Thank you for that. Okay, next item is the government co-chair nominations. That's me. I think most of you know this already, but I'm going to be retiring this summer. So we need to have somebody in the government co-chair. And I'd like to make a recommendation for someone as a 2-year term. And that someone is Adam Wood. So Maya's got another chat up.
Yep. And there's another poll if you would like to nominate someone to serve as the government co-chair. We would welcome that now. And then we can see what options we have. If you all would prefer to keep the nominations open for a longer period of time and revisit this at a later meeting, we can. Or if folks are happy to confirm a government co-chair at the meeting today, we also have an election ready to go. It's the will of the group at this point, but we have one nomination of Adam Wood. And it looks like several folks are offering suggestions.
Adam, do you accept the nomination?
Sorry about that. Having trouble getting the mute off. Yes, I do.
Thank you for confirming.
All right. Right now, what is being considered as an open-ended nominations question. And so I've received 5 responses. If there's no additional ones coming in, I will end that poll and we'll see what those nominations look like and see if the nominees accept there as well. So unless I hear an objection, I'm going to close the nominations. All right. And all of the nominations are for Adam Wood. So I guess I will ask the group, are you comfortable voting today, or would you prefer to vote at a subsequent meeting? You can unmute, or you can put your preference in the chat.
Adam, I'm sorry that I don't know you. Would you give us a one sentence who you are and where do you work? That would be awesome. Thanks.
Hi there. Yeah, sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sure. My name is Adam Wood. I'm with Hillsborough County Public Utilities Environmental Services. I have worked for the county for about 12 years. Throughout that whole time, I've been part of this nitrogen management consortium. Before that, I spent about 8 years working for the DEP as a industrial and wastewater and stormwater inspector. Before that, I spent about 5 years doing research in the Everglades and Biscayne Bay, and as a consultant for a year doing WIBID studies throughout the state. So a couple more sentences than one, but that's who I am.
All right. Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself, Adam. It seems like the consensus is that people would prefer to vote today. So I'll go ahead just for consistency and launch the government co-chair election poll. And I think we're at the same number of votes that we received for the industry co-chair, and it is similarly successful for you, Adam. So I'm going to close the poll. And we've got 2 new co-chairs, so congratulations. And thank you to Michelle and Tino and to Ilya and Adam. We look forward to working with you as leaders for the consortium.
Thank you very much.
Glenn Miles, thank you, Michelle, for your tenure as the government co-chair of the consortium as well. Thanks again, and we wish you a great retirement this summer. I'm jealous.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Okay. So moving on, we do have a DEP response to our decision memo. And Ed, can I ask you to talk a little bit about that?
as you might recall, on the heels of the Old Tampa Bay Similar Capacity Assessment and meetings with the Old Tampa Bay Working Group and the full consortium, there was a decision at the January meeting to submit one question to the DEP regarding the recommendation that came out of both the working group and the consortium to continue to report on completed, ongoing, and planned nitrogen load reduction projects as the reasonable assurance determination for the Old Tampa Bay segment to meet its water quality standards in the future. So we posed that question to the DEP, and I believe Ben Rouse and Kevin O'Donnell is online to kind of give a little bit of background on what that response was from the DEP perspective. We are still waiting an EPA response. We've heard that there's one in the works, but we have not yet officially received it. It sounded like they were going to provide a similar letter response as what was provided to DEP just for the consortium's information. So Ben and Kevin, if you did have any additional comments or want to summarize a little bit more of the DEP's response, feel free to unmute yourselves now.
Hi, Ed. Hi, group. This is Kevin O'Donnell speaking. I'll go ahead and kick it off, and if I miss something, you can fill in. In general, to kind of summarize the response, we definitely considered all the merits and things that were in the letter, obviously. And the simple part of it is that the parts that talked about the table 1 that had the MS4 components, basically what we just relayed is that in terms of reasonable assurance demonstrations, that's not usually something that's counted as towards credit because it's basically compliance with an NPDES MS4 permit. So that we noted that there in that paragraph. But then second, there's obviously other wastewater facility issues. There are upgrades or changes that are being proposed. And those are obviously above and beyond, but also they may deal with legislative requirements, but still we understand that getting in compliance with legislative requirements takes time. It's expensive. It doesn't happen. You got to budget for it numerous years, and that takes time to get that implemented. So in that regard, kind of the statement we used was that overall, it's not necessarily reasonable assurance, but as I've mentioned to Ed and Maya and Mark many times, it's like, in my opinion, reasonable assurance has been demonstrated by the Nitrogen Management Consortium historically. And now we're in more of the phase of continuation of that and addressing new problems as they come around. Obviously, relying on the decision key that you guys have for chlorophyll and evaluating the similar capacity. But with that, it kind of shifts towards the reasonable progress, demonstrating the continuation of as new things arise and changes in environmental conditions or land use or whatever it is that there's a reaction and actions are taken to address those. And so it's kind of I'm sticking with the words reasonable progress towards attainment of applicable water quality standards. The second paragraph there then notes that we still think that there is merit in going and fulfilling more of the assimilative capacity review, that was proposed, and looking at other factors that are kind of influencing Old Tampa Bay in the northern part, seagrass recovery, hydrology, things like that. So we still think that projects definitely are the way to get there, to identify nutrient reductions that can occur, whether that's to meet the total nitrogen or really meet chlorophyll as a response variable, but also seagrass as the response variable. So that's kind of it in the nutshell. And I guess I can end with just that we weren't really making a recommendation on obviously the approval of the 5-year update. I mean, we obviously have to receive that first and what things are outlined in that to make a decision. That's that last paragraph. Yep, that's pretty much it though. And if there's any questions for that.
Thanks, Kevin. Does anyone have any questions regarding the DEP response. So I think just to kind of like follow up based on what Kevin just summarized, I think the recommendation that came out of the Old Tampa Bay Working Group and sort of the reaction and DEP response was that there's still some uncertainty in Old Tampa Bay. We know that over this last regional assurance cycle, we've had fairly good water quality conditions, largely due to lack of rainfall for many of the years. But we realize that that could change in the future. So as a sort of second part of this decision memo, we want to entertain a conversation and discussion with the consortium about looking forward over the next RA cycle, the 2032 RA cycle, which would encompass basically 2027 through 2031, and work with the consortium as well as the Estuary Programs Management Conference to come up with sort of an aspirational goal for nitrogen load reduction in this bay segment. We've tried to follow up with the initial assessment of capacity work with additional analyses that are linked within the agenda packet that Marcus is largely responsible with creating. We recognize that, if in the purview of the Nitrogen Management Consortium, this need for continued implementation of nitrogen load reduction projects, potentially at or above what has been listed in those two tables officially submitted to DEP. And we thought it would be a good idea to kind of come up with that aspirational target that might live outside sort of the regulatory purview of DEP, and instead of formally request criteria changes and or changes to sort of the allocations within the base segment, come up with an aspirational target over the next 5-10 years that we could strive to achieve to better connote reasonable assurance to the department that water quality standards will be more consistently met in the future when it does actually start raining again. So that's what we're sort of floating to the consortium and requesting sort of a reaction to that. Again, this is work that we're going to continue to commit to work on as the estuary program, and work probably with the Old Tampa Bay Working Group at a subsequent meeting to kind of round out these discussions. But we wanted to get this initial reaction of the consortium at this meeting based on the DEP response and almost being at the tail end of this regional assurance cycle, prior to moving on to kind of address Old Tampa Bay in the future. So I'll pause there, see if there's any other reaction. Maya and Marcus, I don't know if you wanted to fill in and give a little bit more background or context, or if you think I covered it adequately.
I mean, I think for me, I think you've covered it for the most part. My real sort of the way that I would frame it to the group is that, you've heard from DEP that continuing to to do the reasonable assurance plan updates is an appropriate path forward. We don't need to adjust the numeric nutrient criteria. But they're also, I think, giving a pretty clear signal that additional load reduction projects beyond what is currently in the action plan database will be needed. And so I think the question that we have as the estuary program is sort of what is the level of load reduction projects that will be needed, that will be sufficient for that determination of reasonable progress. And so I think, there's maybe two paths forward, perhaps more, but two simple ones in my mind. One is you already have more projects that you just haven't included in the action plan database, and you'd like time to sort of think through and make sure that you've updated those. And we don't really need to discuss it further. You're already on it. Or there's this other path that Ed is offering, which is that we would adopt sort of a interim, sort of incremental voluntary load reduction targets for the bay segment so that we could give everyone sort of an idea of a goal to shoot for. And hopefully that would, I think, provide a little bit of additional certainty that the load reduction investments that are being made, are getting us to a place that we mutually agree on from the department's perspective as well as the consortium's perspective, that reasonable progress is being met. So that's sort of the question for you is, which one of those paths do you think is the most appropriate for us to take as a group?
Hey, Maya, I mean, it sounds to me that, DEP is sending a clear message that, especially with the MS4s, that just doing what you're required to do under the permit, may not be providing the reasonable assurance. So, potentially uh, additional projects or, this interim goal setting is the way we're going to have to go. My concern is that, I don't know if having something voluntary, not required, I don't know how open maybe those that need to implement additional projects will be able to get the money, the budget to do that. So, I think that would be my concern, but that's definitely something that we can discuss further at the next Old Tampa Bay meeting, because then it will be just, the players, the key players for that sector that we can have them more honest discussions. But I just wanted to kind of like express, and in front of the whole consortium, my concern that, hey, we're getting the message that we need to do more, and hopefully we're able to do more.
Celia.
I can give some context too about those additional items that are linked in the agenda if that's helpful. So there's two items there, and it's just supplementary analyses that I've done to better understand some of the evidence coming out of the assembly capacity project that we've talked about for the last year or so, as well as just some exploratory work that I've done looking at I guess the confidence we can have in attaining regulatory thresholds in the future under changing baselines. It's really just ancillary information that I think informs our thinking about what we're doing at the Nitrogen Management Consortium. The first link I think I presented to you guys back in January. There is a recording online if you're not familiar with that, but it was really just a confirmation that 486 tons of nitrogen per year in Old Tampa Bay is generally a good thing to shoot for, and evidence supporting that's something that is still a useful target and threshold that we want to consider. And then the second one is a journal article that I presented to the TAC back in March. So if you go on our website and look up our meeting materials archive, you can find a recording of that. And it was really just kind of a modeling assessment where I was looking at considering that the conditions are changing in the bay, whether it's temperature or increased rainfall over the years. How is that going to influence the likelihood of us attaining regulatory thresholds in the future if we sort of hold the line at current thresholds? So more of just a prognostic analysis of what we can think about with these changing conditions in the future. And that's currently in review at a journal, Estuaries and Coasts. So hopefully get that published pretty soon. But definitely there's a preprint that's linked there that you can look at to get some more information there, as well as the TAC presentation that I just mentioned. And Ed mentioned earlier too that we have come off back-to-back years of just dry conditions. And that's contrary to, I think, the long-term trends that we've seen for the Bay. If you look at the last 30, 40 years, it's gotten wetter during that time period. So even though we are in a drought, I think the long-term trends do suggest, more rainfall in the future, and that does have implications for attaining regulatory thresholds, and that's kind of what that paper is looking at. So again, just some background information, some of the stuff that I'm busy doing in my corner of the office, if you're curious there. But I do think it is helpful for this larger conversation we're having at the consortium about Old Tampa Bay.
Tony's asking a question about whether the original limits and the MS4 permits were based on the original reasonable assurance plan.
I'm not understanding completely what you're asking, Tony. As far as I know, the permanent limits have changed, and there should be reference to the reasonable assurance plan, as far as I understand.
That's exactly what I'm saying, is that the original MS4, the next round of MS4 permits review were based on the original reasonable assurance plan. In other words, there was not a different limit put on the MS4 permits based on anything other than reasonable assurance plan.
Yeah, and I think just to elaborate further in terms of the sort of the compliance assessment would be towards the um, percent remaining load for those MS4s.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just add that it is very important to remember the history that um, it was not necessarily an overwhelming struggle, but it was a struggle in a sense to get EPA to agree that there is a reasonable assurance and recognize that because of the EPA, federal TMDL. Where TMDLs exist, reasonable assurance plans should not exist. So it's kind of we've gotten past that hurdle, but it's not necessarily that the original RAP as it's designed would have been accepted, at the when in today's world. So can I just add, since I'm off mute here, I just wanted to really quickly note that for those who didn't hear or were not aware, that the changes to DEP's water quality standards were approved by EPA March 24th. And so in that, there was a change to the impaired waters rule and actually 62302 in the water quality standards to better reflect the criteria that is for the S-ray nutrient regions for Tampa Bay, the uncorrected chlorophyll. So we had that discussion as part of this group, which one's going to change. And so that the rules have been revised. And so the applicable standard now is uncorrected chlorophyll, which is more in line with what the original RAP target was set, as an annual arithmetic mean. So we will start to see that in the impaired waters rule assessments that come out with the next biennial assessment starting later this year. We're starting to incorporate those things, but it just helps to be a little bit more in sync with the answers and the assessment that the consortium has, that you guys produce with what we're doing in the impaired waters rule. I think that's a good thing, and I just wanted to relay that.
Appreciate you clarifying that too, Kevin. Is there any other comments, discussion regarding this concept? I think, like I said, our next steps is probably to wrangle the Old Tampa Bay Working Group towards a meeting to kind of continue these discussions, as Ilya sort of alluded to, have more candid discussions around this topic. I just posed two questions in the chat regarding the Old Tampa Bay Working Group members. We're looking to hopefully have a meeting on this path forward, probably within the next month or two. If there's timelines over your summers that wouldn't work, we'd like to hear that now. And do you agree that this warrants additional discussion?
Hey, Ed, Julie Vogel, St. Pete. I just took myself off mute. So, um, and forgive me if I'm misremembering things, but the Old Tampa Bay Working Group and the consortium have been kind of talking about this for a while, right? We need to get our actual like documentation to DEP for approval for the next cycle. That hasn't happened yet, right? We just kind of posed this hypothetical
Yeah,
path forward.
Yeah, it's a continued request to continue to upload your projects across all the base segments into the action plan database because that's a component of the reasonable assurance plan. Sort of parallel to that process, the estuary program is sort of committed to developing an almost full draft by the end of this year of that reasonable assurance plan. We won't have the 2026 loadings complete, but we know from the first 4 years where sort of will lie in terms of overall compliance with chlorofluoride standards across all the base segments at that point. So we're committed to kind of have a full draft in place, and that's going to require all the consortium participants to make sure that their projects through the end of 2026 are officially submitted into the action plan database so that we can reference those in that document. And we'll try to hold a series of meetings in early 2027 with the full consortium to kind of finalize that document, hopefully by the summer of 2027 for early submittal to DEP. But parallel to that, we'd also like to have this conversation with the Old Tampa Bay Working Group on, continued work within that bay segment and sort of this need expressed by the department and what we've shown in terms of the additional assessments and have that kind of conversation with the working group so that we could provide additional assurance to the department over the next RA cycle that we're working towards addressing those issues in Old Tampa Bay, like I said, once it starts raining again. So that's sort of our plan and how we're framing out the rest of this RA cycle. And hopefully that addresses your question, Julie.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. We definitely need to add all of our projects into the action plan database with City of St. Pete is behind. So sorry to the whole group for that. And then two, when Maya was talking earlier about how she sees kind of two scenarios, which is adding all the projects to the database, which obviously we need to do that present and future, and then also having voluntary target reductions. I think really that's the only path forward. So I don't know what else we would kind of talk about during an Old Tampa Bay working group meeting. I mean, I'm happy to chat more, but I think, again, here in this meeting with DEP and in past meetings with the consortium and the Old Tampa Bay working group, we've kind of already landed on an outcome. And again, maybe I'm just not understanding,
Julie,
but yeah, go ahead,
I
Maya.
think, Julie, if you guys have other projects that are sort of in the works or canned already, and you just haven't entered them in the database, there's a chance that you're documenting much greater load reductions than what we've floated to DEP so far. So it's sort of
Maybe, probably unlikely, I would say, though. That's all for St. Pete. So we still have to add stuff.
okay.
I
Well, then
guess.
the question for me as NMC co-facilitator is, we have as staff done this Old Tampa Bay assimilative capacity assessment with technical support contractors. We've presented findings and recommendations to the group, and we've been a little bit sort of out of sync on, what the consortium would like to do going forward. And I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we understand what consortium members, particularly in the Old Tampa Bay segment, if there is an openness to or support for voluntary load reduction targets that are sort of more structured and they're not changing the rules, but they are formally agreed to by the partners. If that's something that you are open to, supportive of, and that will be helpful in securing some of the political and financial will to implement those projects, or if it's the case that you already know what you need to do and you're already doing it. So to me, those two things, I don't have a clear read on the group about which of those paths is desirable for the majority.
I can just speak for City of St. Pete that we would appreciate, I think, voluntary targets and help with the estuary programs, help with putting target percentages or numbers out there to strive for. So just
Yeah,
one municipality.
Right. So I think that the Old Tampa Bay Working Group meeting essentially would be first the temperature check to see how all the entities shake on that. And then if there is general support for voluntary targets, then I think there's a lot of ways that we could approach what those targets look like. And so we would want to start to initiate the conversations about sort of how much, at what level, how we communicate it, how we incorporate it in the RA, all of those kinds of things. So that would be, I would hope that if we can move past the should we or shouldn't we thing relatively quickly, we can dive into the how we would develop and what those voluntary targets would look like so that we could report on that quite clearly in the reasonable assurance plan that we deliver to the department in 2027. So far in the chat and from those who have spoken up, I'm hearing general support for this discussion and moving forward with voluntary targets. I know I haven't heard from very many of you, but that's really the only opinion that's been expressed so far. I haven't heard any dates. Would you all prefer that I set out like a meeting poll for dates if we can't come up with a time right now?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Generally, do folks think I should hustle to get it done in May before summer vacation season starts? Or do folks think waiting wouldn't be a problem?
It may be better to try to get it in May.
Okay.
I agree.
We'll hustle then.
Sounds like we have beat that one to death for this meeting at least. I think we're reserving space, Michelle and Ilya, on sort of the lingering topics for the RA. I kind of alluded to what we were planning with regards to developing a draft of the 2027 RA update by the end of this year. Contingent on that, we're also putting out a request for the loading information from all the point sources through 2025. We haven't received your information in your facilities. You're going to get those asked here pretty soon. We're trying to develop those loads as quickly as possible. Again, trying to integrate that into a draft of the RA plan, at least through the first 4 years, to have all that loading information in place as part of that draft by the end of this year. Of course, we're not completely through the last year of the RA, so we'll make that call again towards the tail end of 2026. But as you're able to, please provide any of your DMR data for your facilities ahead of time, if possible, to us. That will help facilitate some of the loads. Marcus, you want to chime in?
Yeah, just to mention, I think for last year and all years prior, correspondence was pretty much through Ray. He was requesting those point source loads from y'all, if not voluntarily sent to him. I think he's probably going to be very happy that I'm taking over that responsibility moving forward. So expect to see an email from me in the near future requesting your point source information for your facilities, and then subsequent follow-up emails if I do not receive them. But to stave off any emails from me, you can send them to me directly as soon as possible. So far, I've only got one report from Ilya, so Gold Star Ilya, be like Ilya. But yeah, please try to get those to us as soon as possible. As soon as we get that information, the sooner we can calculate loading estimates to all segments of the bay and get that reported out to you all. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Marcus. And I'm looking at on the agenda 6A2, another component of that reasonable assurance plan that we will try to develop a draft by the end of this year is recommendations to the department on any changes to the allocation tables. We have been made aware by a couple of entities that there's going to be some necessary adjustments to the tables. Nick Fletcher was unable to participate from Tico today, but he was going to bring sort of a recommendation and sort of update on Tico's interim allocation for Middle Tampa Bay to the consortium. So we'll probably have that as a agenda topic at a future consortium meeting. We still also have sort of the lingering request for the Piney Point facility in Lower Tampa Bay of how to reconcile that. So any changes to specific allocations that would be recommended as part of each of the base segments is a component of this reasonable assurance plan update. And we'd kind of want to work through those things as well over the next year to year and a half to finalize the RA document, just to get everyone on the same page in terms of what that means in terms of finalizing the allocation tables. And then, as I mentioned before, we're always continuing to ask for consortium participants to submit their planned ongoing and completed projects in the new action plan database uh, form. That's basically an online web form. Again, this helps us present to the department sort of the progress being made throughout all the base segments on nitrogen load reduction activities of each of the entities that have allocations in the reasonable assurance plan. That's a critical component of the reasonable assurance plan updates, and also shows sort of the investments being made by all the partners to continue to maintain nutrient loads at sufficient levels to hopefully improve seagrass recovery throughout Tampa Bay by keeping chlorophyll concentrations down. So again, if you have projects that have been implemented over the 2022 to 2026 current RA period, please get those projects in as quickly as possible. That's sort of one table that rounds out the reasonable assurance plan. There's also future plan projects past 2026 that we also, if you have any information on those planned activities and future RA cycles, that's also a component that we want to show the department that there's sort of this ongoing work and investment that is planned in the future to maintain reasonable assurance for Tampa Bay. So we want those project concept ideas as well. And then if you have any other continuing ongoing education projects, we kind of carry a lot of those projects forward and want to get your input on whether or not they're still relevant in each of the success of RA plan updates. So as we develop that 2027 draft RA plan, you'll see these tables that sort of represent these planned ongoing and completed projects. And we'll want to get your feedback as quickly as possible through the course of 2026 on all those projects. Again, our target is to kind of finalize those tables probably by the summer of next year, 2027, so that we could actually turn regional assurance plan well ahead of the deadline of next December. And then I think the last sort of discussion item that we had on there have been sort of lingering discussions of the consortium of minor updates that have occurred since the original allocations were developed back in 2009. We know that sort of land use changes have occurred. There's also been boundary expansions by jurisdictions. We know that there's a lot of activity ongoing towards septic to sewer conversions. A lot of those have been past discussions of the consortium of how that might affect an entity's allocation within base segments where those activities are occurring, and whether or not any adjustments to the allocations are warranted, especially since some of the land use that we're used to develop some of those allocations back in 2009 are now 15 plus years old versus what we have now. So again, those are sort of ongoing discussions that we've had of the consortium, but I would welcome any sort of additional comment, and we'll be looking probably to the new consortium chairs to see if we want to place these on future agendas of the consortium to kind of round out the discussions during this RA cycle.
I think it's really important to have a sense of what work will be needed over the 2027 to 2031 RA period so that we can figure out what sort of budget would be necessary so we can back that into the contributions for all of the consortium participants and figure out how to secure a technical support contractor that can help accomplish the things that you would like to pursue as well.
I know I ran through those, but I would like it open up to the consortium if there was any sort of further discussion or thoughts on any of those topics. We'd love to hear them now. Um, this is your time to continue to provide input to us so that we know sort of the direction and that is being requested on each of those items by us as the SRE program facilitators to the consortium. Let some awkward silence go for a little bit. See if anyone chimes in.
Not hearing anything.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in real quick because I think we talked a little bit about this when we had the meeting. And I think you mentioned that each RA update does include some minor revisions to like land uses and something like that. But I mean, is that something that shows a significant change? And again, I think what I mentioned during when we talked before was when does it get to the point when it is no longer representative of current present conditions? That's my concern with.
Think we're evaluating loading based on the newest land use and land cover. The sort of place that it becomes the point at which it becomes a challenge is if a bay segment is not attaining water quality standards, and we have to dive down into the individual entity compliance. That allocation that the current loading is being measured against is based off of land use from the early 2000s. And I think we had during the prior RA period, Ray looked at that, and there is significant drift, but we have not been in a position where the downstream standards are not being attained, and so we report on that entity level compliance, but it hasn't really we haven't got to that point in the decision framework where it's been problematic for the entities.
So it sounds like I guess the consortium maybe looking into not addressing it unless there's a concern with attainment. Like now, has that been looked at all Tampa Bay? Because we had some issues there. I can't remember.
Yeah, the specific question and sort of comparisons that Maya just alluded to, that has been updated in quite some time. Ray actually and Tony Shop provide that in the past in terms of land use changes, and each one of the base segments kind of shows some differences in loading based on those land use changes to different degrees. It's more of, like Maya said, whether or not we want to be proactive in kind of addressing that before we actually trip the downstream attainment standards. And it's been sort of the prerogative of the consortium not to at this point, but it's an ongoing conversation that we, just being stewards and facilitators of the consortium, we want to have to keep it on top of your radar as an outstanding issue that has been discussed in the past, and whether or not we want to be proactive in addressing it now.
I think it may be helpful maybe for next meeting to have maybe a presentation on, the changes that we're seeing, and just because I'm having problem picturing, when you say there's been changes, what are those changes, and what are things looking like, just going through the exercise without, I guess, which is what we've been doing, but you've probably presented it in the past, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now, seeing, or maybe seeing the latest, and then being able to discuss it a little further.
Yeah, and I
Yep,
think
that's
if it's okay with you, Ilya, maybe not even the next meeting, we maybe kind of keep working through the development of this RA update this time around. And then when we sort of get through the bulk of that update, we sort of stage up sort of the realm of possibilities for future
Yeah.
research, and we can kind of revisit what Ray's produced in the past, and have a more informed and deeper dive conversation, but maybe not try and rush it to the next meeting is what my
Yeah,
suggestion would be.
that sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, because we don't want to push any of this through in the
No.
2027 RA update, just to be very clear. We
Okay.
agreed that it's
It's
this.
just kind of like a heads up, kind of like keeping in the mind that it's been a long time. And yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree. That sounds good.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
So Stacy has a question about the results on stormwater projects being presented to the group. Stacy, are you asking about the Jones Edmonds Old Tampa Bay Regional Stormwater Controls Project? Is that what you're asking about? Ed, do you want to?
Yeah, so parallel to the effort, just to provide additional context to the full consortium, the SRA program received some restore funding to investigate sort of large regional stormwater retrofits across multiple jurisdictions in Old Tampa Bay. So looking across all the jurisdictions represented in that bay segment and try to identify large load reduction projects, primarily to reduce nutrient inputs into the Old Tampa Bay segment. So they've been working through some baseline information and doing a surface water quality assessment, which is pretty close to being completed currently. From that, they're going to develop a couple of project concepts for potential projects to be implemented in the future that will hopefully go to full permitting and then construction with additional funding from the Restore Council. So we're planning hopefully to have some initial project concepts by this summer, Stacy, from that effort. Um, I think the full sort of prioritization probably will extend through the end of this year. So it will be kind of running parallel to when we're developing the regional assurance plan update. But outcomes from that project will hopefully be integrated into the regional assurance plan update as well. So that's sort of the interim timelines in terms of identifying um, larger scale projects, hopefully within the Bay segment to address nutrient load reductions. Hopefully this summer, and then sort of more of a firm prioritization probably towards the tail end of this year. Hopefully that answers your question, and feel free to unmute yourself, Stacy, if you had any follow-ups. See the thumbs up. So, okay.
So I will be following up with the Old Tampa Bay entities to schedule a working group meeting. We'll kind of take the summer and early fall to be developing the 2025 loading data and sort of convene some of these working groups, and then plan to sort of take it a little bit easier on the frequency of these full consortium meetings. So not meeting again until probably in the late fall of this year, unless something else comes up. So with that being said, please be entering your projects in the action plan database, provide your point source loading information to Marcus so that we can get those 2025 loads completed. And for those of you in the working groups, we'll be seeing you, and the rest of you will see you later this fall. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Maya and Ed, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you.